Huh? No, it did it, but something happened. I don't know. I'm in. I'm in. Yeah, but I'm about to mute.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We're all joining. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing good. I hope you are.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Let me see. There's Alan, that's Frank.
Dr. Lamb, I successfully made it back from Florida. Thank the Lord.
Congratulations.
Jeez. Not to say that I won't have to go back down and up, but we're good for now.
Good.
So thank you for that.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
I think your prayers were answered. So were mine.
That's yeah. Mine get answered sometimes, even though I don't deserve it. You probably do, but it always helps to pray. I can tell you that.
Amen to that. Frank, thanks for your prayers too, man. I appreciate it.
It's
Glad you made it back safe.
yeah, I know. That's
Yeah, last week if we had the greatest distance from Dr. Lamb, I think I would have won it.
yeah. But my all-timer was I had a lady that started out with us in Jacksonville, North Carolina, military dependent.
Oh yeah. Oh boy.
But then her husband got transferred to Hickam on the Big Island in Hawaii.
Yep.
And now they don't observe daylight saving time over there. And
Right.
so the problem that we had, she would try, then she came back after she did the add-on to get the 2 classes for masters. And the problem with her is the either 5 or 6 hour time differential to come to class. And it was always, when we were having class, it was, 7 o'clock class over there was 2 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And so, but she got through. She's a great student. Yeah, we've had some that, then I have one, Dr. Stedman and I, welcome Dr. Stedman, we have one in Haiti.
Haiti, yes. That's what
The whole time. Yes. But the good thing about Haiti is it's same time. But
part of the time, remember, they didn't even have.
They didn't have power.
They didn't have power, so she couldn't come on. She couldn't join us in class a lot of times simply because they were going without power.
So what she would have to do is walk a couple miles to the library and come online with us when they had power. And she broke my heart. I never will forget. She broke my heart when she did the assessment inventory, and we're worried about locked floors, locked doors. They had dirt floors in their school. It was the most heartbreaking thing ever. And so,
she was doing missionary type work.
Yeah, she was doing missionary work there in a mission school. And so
she actually has been to the Fayetteville area.
Yeah.
Come to Fayetteville area. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had some. I have a doctoral student that flies in from New Jersey for class. I don't know which is worse, flying in or living in New Jersey.
Living in New Jersey.
Was ugly, wasn't it?
No, it's not ugly if it's true.
That's what I
was working at the
figured.
shipyard.
Yeah.
I was working at the shipyard. I was in Philadelphia, right across from New Jersey, and I was good. I was there I'm happy. I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah, as my father would have said, that's a good place to be from, as in the past tense. Not going back there. All right. Let me share my screen. It's 7 o'clock on the dot. Well, welcome to Mels 603. Dr. Steadman is with us. Now, remember, Doctors Massengill and Tobias will work with you if needed. They are in class right now, but they watch the videos. But so far, I would like to say that nobody has needed that help. Everybody's work's been great. Couple of people forgot a couple things, but added it in quickly. The quality of the work has been outstanding. I want to go back and highlight from week 1, where we looked at facilities and budget and those things. I want to call out Kishlin and Zebra and Ingrid did a great job on their inventories, and they picked up on something that's a big problem. Now, you will not fail a state audit if you have interior doors unlocked. They will write you up. If you have a state audit, they will write you up. That's a real liability issue. 2 kids go to a room and something happens. Somebody gets hurt, something sexual. An unlocked room inside the building is a real problem. It won't fail a state audit, but it is a real liability issue. Now, Kishlin pointed out, if you have an outside door that's unlocked on a regular basis, like in the loading area at the back of your school, that will fail a state audit. That will bring a fine from a fire marshal. That will cause you a serious problem. And that one, your district, you won't lose that one in court because your district won't go to court. That's an automatic loser. They'll settle any case that happened as a result of you having the door outside unlocked as a regular occurrence. They'll have to pay. They won't even bother to go to court on that. So thank you for those pulling those out. And again, traffic, if you have kids walking through cars or cars that can get 2 kids, that will fail a state audit as well. I wanted to highlight those. So those are kind of the 3 biggies that you really need, and it happens all the time, and you really need to be diligent on your facilities. Make sure teachers lock their classrooms when they leave. Don't allow the kitchen staff to prop the back door open to let the smoke and heat out. That one will, that's a loser. That won't even go to court. And then do not allow parents to shortcut the system. Don't allow that to happen on the traffic deal. If you've got kids and cars together and one of them gets hit, doesn't matter that the person hit them might have been in the wrong place or let their kids out in the wrong place. You'll lose that one as well. So those are the 3 biggies: your traffic, kids in traffic, and unlocked doors. So just as a reminder from having done that activity, let's see. Dr. Steadman, are you catching the Kareem raised his hand. I don't know if he I don't see that he put a chat in. Kareem, are you there?
Yeah. I don't have anything in chat, no.
Yes, I got a question.
Okay, Kareem.
Is it a big deal if the buses and the cars go to the same location?
Absolutely. If you're a state school, that's supposed to be fixed. They're not supposed to go to the same place. They are not supposed to be. I mean, DOT is supposed to figure out, Department of Transportation is supposed to figure out a way that does not happen. And most places, 99%, that doesn't happen. What happens is somebody in the car wants to shortcut the process. Doesn't want to wait in line. They go to the bus lot and let a kid out or something. But DOT is supposed to fix your traffic flow so that cars and buses don't go in the same place. Sometimes it's just signage.
And the schedule should delayed schedule so that they're not all leaving at the same time either.
Yes. You're supposed to hold the buses until the cars all get out. Until car pickup is done. If they have to use the same area. If they have to use the same area, you have to run a delayed schedule. Thank you, Dr. Steadman, for that piece. That is correct. If there's some way that, you know, some of these old schools and areas that you can't put a new driveway or utilize the front and back of the school, you're supposed to have a delayed schedule. They won't be in the same place at the same time. That's exactly right. That's a great question, Kareem. Yeah, that's how that's supposed to work. Anybody have any other questions on our first assignment, which was, let me move this out of the way. We got a question, Dr. Stedman. Let me see. Let me get over here to this discussion board. And so that should close the chapter on doing our assessments, looking at our school plans, emergency plans. As I responded to you, you got to be able to find them. They've got to be practiced. They've got to be up to date. Your crisis kit with current rosters of students, those kinds of things. The biggie on that one is your assessment inventory, locked doors, and traffic. And those are the two areas where you have the most liability as an administrator. If you know cars are pulling in the bus lot, letting kids out, and you don't do anything about it, and the kid gets hit, that will not go well for you. So again, remember, we're trying to mitigate our liability. You know that there is personal liability, tort liability. You can be sued as an individual, not just the school and the district. And the thing about our facilities, we want to keep kids safe. We want them to be safe and secure, in loco parentis, in place of the parent. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for kids. We're also trying to mitigate liability and, negligence lawsuits, malfeasance, nonfeasance, and misfeasance. There's 3 types of negligence. And we'll get to that as we go. But misfeasance is we did the wrong thing. Nonfeasance, we didn't do anything. We ignored it. We just let it ride. Or malfeasance, we intentionally did the wrong thing, like hiding data or doing something like that. And so, I don't want to broker a big, long-winded discussion about the ethics of reporting. We'll get to that later when we get to disciplinary, due process and disciplinary data. But one of the things that we all understand is when we underreport bad things that happen on our campus, we tend to ignore or not address those bad things happening, and more bad things tend to happen. And so that would be called malfeasance. We intentionally did the wrong thing, which was not reporting what was going on our campuses. But we're trying to mitigate liability on misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. Nonfeasance being, I knew the cars were letting kids out there in that bus lot, but I didn't do anything about it. I didn't do anything, and I should have. That would be misfeasance or nonfeasance. All right, so let's move on to this week's activity about human resources. Now, the good thing about all these, remember, the good thing, these assignments are put in discussion board so everybody can read everybody else's, and that's and we share in the knowledge, and we can celebrate what everybody does, and that's why I kind of call people out for the great work they've done. You can go back to your discussion board if they're in your section and look at them. I try to change sections. And so this week, Tracy, I was really impressed with Tracy's. She went through the process that charter schools do to hire, which is a little different than traditional public school. Not that charter schools aren't public school, but we're talking about traditional public schools. Let me see. I think Tracy's with us tonight. I haven't seen her pop up, but I want to call her. So she did a good job. But now, in terms of a traditional public school, how they go about hiring.
It's very true. It's very, very different.
Pardon? I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
I think I'm delayed. I'm on my phone driving.
Okay. Well, great job on if you're in a public school, traditional public school, and you wonder how charter schools work, you should read Tracy's post. She did a great job outlining that. If you're not in a public school, or if you're in one that you want to know more about how to go about hiring in a traditional public school setting, Andrea did a great job. She's up in Henderson County at Edneyville. She's gone through every step, all the laws, everything. She's done a great job. If you can see Andrea's, she has done a great job in outlining the hiring process from each legal standpoint, highly qualified, certification, alternative path. She's got it all in hers, and so I would highlight what she has done as a wonderful job. I could pull that up and actually look at it, I think, right now. Let me see if I've got the right one here. Yep, I do. I'm gonna go ahead and pull, and so I won't sit and read through it all, but you can see she has everything. She's got all, the policy manual, pathways to licensure. She's got it all right here. If you want to know from A to Z, how it works about hiring, everything about it, she's done an excellent job. She's not the only one, but this one caught my eye. And what a great job she's done on that. And so the takeaway on hiring is you got to know what your district does. Again, does your district screen candidates? Do they check references? Who calls for the interview? I mean, all those things. It works differently in every district, and you got to know how it works in your district. How are openings posted? Who goes about setting the time limit on the posting? All those kinds of things you need to know so that you don't get an EEOC complaint that you have violated somebody's job rights. And then Andrea pointed out at the end something that all of us have to remember, and even me from Dr. Stedman, old guys, we got to remember, the board actually hires these people, not the principal, not the superintendent. The school board does the hiring. And so we have to remember sometimes that we might have worked completely through the right process and done everything exactly right. The name goes to the board for some reason, it doesn't happen. That is a part of the public school system, that it's not the superintendent, it's not the principal, it's the board that hires. Hopefully that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And you have to understand that the principal only recommends to the superintendent, and the superintendent only recommends to the school board. And the school board says yay or nay on hiring and firing everybody. Now, I would not argue with you if you said that's an antiquated system. Why do we have lay people deciding who to hire when we have professionals who we pay to know that kind of thing? I won't argue that that's not a good point. I'm just telling you how the law works. And that's the purpose of this course, is to teach you the practical application of how all these laws and policies work. And that's one of those quirky things that I have wondered for years why we didn't change that.
And it's very political.
Exactly. Why we don't change that, but we haven't. And right. So even though we've worked through every step of the process and done it legally and done it ethically and professionally, in the end, we have a lay board of people who decide whether they'll go with that recommendation or not. And many times it is a very political decision. But we're charged with doing it ethically, professionally, legally. If they decide to make a different decision, that's on them, and they'd have to face that lawsuit if somebody said, why was my recommendation rejected? But we have to, as professional staff, we have to follow all laws, policies, ethical practice. If we don't, we're personally liable in a lawsuit. The board can do what they want to do, good or bad or indifferent, but we as professional staff, and that's kind of the takeaway from the first 2 weeks here that I want to make sure that I drive home to everybody is that you're professional staff. You don't have many of the protections that elected officials have. If you do something wrong, you get a malpractice lawsuit against you, you have to pay. Elected officials have a different set of standards that they have to go by. You are not an elected official. You're professional staff. So you can't ignore rules, laws, policies, best practice. You have to follow whatever the process is in your district. You have to make sure that you follow that process in hiring. And that's the takeaway from the first couple of weeks. All right, I want to look at next week. quickly before we go back and catch a couple things from last week and then do this week. Next week, we're going to start looking at our special programs. We're going to look at intervention team and exceptional children. Now, I'm going to tell you right now before you start, I've had a couple people who've already done this, and they did a great job. Intervention teams are what the state calls a school-based committee, SBC. That is very important. The reason why it's important is that if something goes wrong, it doesn't track back to the EC department or somewhere else in your district. It comes back straight to the principal's office. So when a child is referred to the intervention team for academic or behavior difficulty anywhere in K-12, this is not just an elementary thing, they have the same rights as if they were already identified as an exceptional child. You got to understand that. And now we have multi-tiered system of support for those students, and they have to go through a process of up to 90 days before the 90-day EC process starts. Before a child can be tested for exceptional children program, they have to go through a federally required 90-day period. The first 30 days, teachers collect anecdotal information on students, what they're doing, what they're not doing. The second 30 days of that required 90, they put an intervention is put in to address whatever deficiencies they have. And then for the last 30, we either continue with that first level intervention or we start a different one because the first one wasn't working. That 90 days is federally mandated before you can test a child for exceptional children's program. If you do not do that 90 days, you are liable as a principal. 2014, 11 principals lost their job right before the school year started because that was in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, because African-American males were being tested within 2 weeks of being referred. So that's the 90-day requirement. Now, the states, South and North Carolina, have added another up to 90 days on top of that to bring the total up to 180. That MTSS, multi-tiered system support, may include something like response to intervention and other programs. So now they're getting a 90-day to try to get better before the official 90 starts. So it can be up to 180 days. Now, that's mandated, but every district isn't all the way up to the 180 days yet. You need to find out what your district is doing. They've got to at least be at 60 days now. Last year, they had to be up to 30. I think they don't have to be all the way to the other 90 plus the 90 until next year. But some districts went ahead and did the 90 and 90 already. You need to find out what your district does. You need to understand how your intervention team works at your school. Again, that's the responsibility of the school administration. If it's not being carried out with fidelity, if kids aren't being tested, if interventions aren't being done, the principal's on the line for that. Now, once a child gets tested and is inducted into the exceptional children's program, once they make the head count, if something goes wrong from there, it's on the exceptional children's department, the department chair, the coordinating teacher, the CT, but not during that intervention period time. That up to 180 days, the principal's on the hook for what happens to that kid. So you need to understand and know, what does our district say that these kids are going to get during that 180 days, or how much of that 100 they get the 90? What do they get? And what do they get before the 90? And what does it consist of? What do we do? Do we do response to intervention? Or are we doing, what kind of program are we doing? Are we doing PBIS? What are we doing in our intervention phase before the 90 days? What are we doing? And then the other thing is attend an IEP meeting. All right, the kid places an EC. You have an IEP meeting. Who's in charge? How's it go? How are decisions made? And one of the things that's hardest for regular ed people who have never been to those when they go to the first one is they don't seem to understand. It doesn't matter who did the paperwork, you did all that work. The decisions are collaborative with the parent. And the parent can just say, no, you've not convinced me. And so there are more special programs, and that's why we had you in OMA Task 1 do an audit of all the special programs. There's EC, there's intervention teams, there's 504 disadvantage, there's gifted and talented, there's limited English proficiency, there's Title I. All of those are federal programs. You need to know how all of those work and who's responsible and what's supposed to be happening at your school. Because that's the stuff that gets you in trouble the fastest. Is these programs are supposed to be happening, they're not happening with fidelity. Somebody sues you because they're not, their kid isn't getting what they're supposed to get, and you can't go in and show that you were tracking to make sure that they were getting those things. And trust me, those parents know the law better than you do. So make sure that you understand that. So that's what's coming up next week. Next week, we will talk about our case study. So that kind of catches us up on our weekly activities. You folks are doing a great job on those. You're interviewing the right people. You're talking to your principals. Or you're talking to your APs. You're getting, some of you're talking with some of your central office staff. Not only are you learning, there's also a back bounce on this. You're getting your name out there. People know who you are. You're getting on the radar for jobs. So these activities not only increase your learning, they increase your visibility. I encourage you to make sure that you take the opportunity. Blame me. Dale's making us do this. That's fine. But take the opportunity to get out and meet these people and talk with these people in a professional sense. Get on their radar. That Kareem, he's pretty sharp. He has some pretty good questions. Or in my case, that Dale's dumb as a cake of soap. We'd never hire him. But give yourself an opportunity to get out there. And it puts your name and your face out there. And that's what's great about this. But there's a lot of learning that comes with it as well. All right, I want to shift gears and cover a couple things from last week. And make sure that we get to those. Let me check these chats right quick. All right, so let me go here. I want to do a quick review of court cases. In all academic settings, you have to know the watershed events, moments, the seminal works. Just like in 601, we had you do the 4 PLCs. He's the seminal person. We had Whitaker on empowerment as a school leader, Linda Darling Hammond. Well, in law, there are watershed cases that shape what currently is happening in any profession. And as I said last week, I introduced this quickly. I want to walk us through these. These are the things that I would encourage you to, your book references most of these. If you don't know much about these, I would encourage you to spend some time. Brown and 54 set modern schooling. Now, here's the sad part. We didn't do anything with it for 9, 10, 11 years. North Carolina didn't integrate till 66. Dr. Stedman and I were in school then, and we remember it still. We didn't do anything until the Civil Rights Act. Even though Brown is the watershed court case, until the Civil Rights Act was passed in 65, we did nothing. For 11 years, we didn't make the first effort at integrating schools until the Civil Rights Act. And so even though Brown is the seminal case, what actually moved us to action was the Civil Rights Act in 65. And so North Carolina started integrating in 66, South Carolina at the same time. That caused a lot of school consolidation. States exited capital funding, which pays for buildings and facilities, and left that up to the local districts. They couldn't keep up. They moved their money into building community colleges rather than public schools, and said the county is now, the county schools, the county commissioners are now responsible to fund facilities, buildings, grounds. And that comes directly from property taxes on private residential and business properties. And as I said, part in the more modern era since 2000, that wasn't a problem for the first 35 years. It has become a problem in this century in that all these corporate tax relief programs in order to attract businesses to the counties and communities. Every time they give a business a tax waiver or tax relief or don't have to pay any taxes, that's money that the school district doesn't get, because that's who is giving up that money. So when Facebook built a server farm in Rutherford County and they gave them a $6 million piece of property and gave them, no taxes in perpetuity, that came directly from the school's budget. And it was very few jobs because it's just a server farm. And so initially that wasn't an issue, but now that we attract businesses and that's become, those businesses contribute to local political races and state races. So what we have now is businesses don't pay a lot of taxes. And so that is the reason why so much money has come out of the school budget in this century. We've seen a lack of that. And that goes directly to facilities. The state does not give you facility money. The Elementary and Secondary Acts of 65, Title I through Title IX, those are still around. That in many ways has defined how we operate schools in terms of the support that we get to struggling students, gender equity and all those things. All those titles came in 65. 69, Tinker versus Des Moines, you'll hit one of that in one of our cases. It's, in terms of due process rights, you can't just arbitrarily decide to punish a kid without giving them the opportunity to present their side of the case, witnesses and those things. Watershed in 71 was busing for integration. That stood for 30 years until it was overturned in 2001 with the Capuchon lawsuit. And for 30 years, we were under federal order to desegregate schools and bus them if we had to. We no longer do that nationally. Schools resegregated overnight. But for 30 years, we did have forced integration. That we've now coming on 20 years, we've not had it, and we've seen a big change in the demographic of our schools in that last 19, 20 years. 74 EC kids got rights for the first time, 94, 142, and they started coming to school. That's why we have exceptional children's programs now. The basic ed plan in 84 in North Carolina said every child gets a basic education. This happened nationally. It was a response to Diane Ravitch's book. She's a professor at Columbia, A Nation at Risk. And so that led us to our first attempt to differentiate pay. It didn't last long, but what came out of it was accountability. That's what came out of the basic ed plan. In 84, law passed that a child has to get a basic education. Somebody said, well, what is a basic education? So we spent from 84 to 89 writing a statewide curriculum in most states, North Carolina chief among them, big white books called the Standard Course of Study. Took us 5 years, but we wrote the curriculum for every grade level, every high school course, everything, put them in big notebooks and said, all right, this is what a child is supposed to get. And then somebody said, well, how do we know if they got it or not? And so in 89, when the curriculum was written, we started accountability. It was called performance-based accountability. It became the state ABCs, which is now the state report cards in all states, that says how you're doing. Are these kids getting this basic education? So that defined for us. So we started in 1984. Dr. Stedman and I were school administrators at the time and said, this is what your teachers will teach now. It took us 5 years, and then this is what will be tested. And that's where state testing came from, the end of grade course, end of course exam and end of grade exams. That's where they came from that law. It all goes back to the 1984 basic education plan, and then all the accountability that came from that. And so that's why we're in high stakes testing. That's where that came from. When Dr. Stedman and I were first principals, we only had the California Achievement Test, and it wasn't high stakes. It was, for bragging rights over at the country club or at the drag race or whatever, but it wasn't, it didn't have the implications that we now have in terms of testing, in terms of what can happen to you in your career as a school administrator if your school doesn't do well academically. But all those things have happened in our professional careers. 94 to 98, the Leandro case, and we do have that as one of our case studies this semester, where low wealth districts, and Dr. Stedman was working in one of those, and I was working in one of the high wealth during that time. We were on different sides of the fence. The low wealth district said, wait a minute, you need to give us more money from the state. And the high wealth district said, wait a minute, we don't want to give you, we don't want the state to take our money to give to you. So I will explain this when we get to that case study, when we get to the Leandro case study. But basically, the low wealth district sued the state and said, you're giving everybody the same. The high wealth districts have more local money to put with it. So in the end, they're spending more money per pupil, and their kids are getting a better education than ours because of disparities. Even though we get the same from the state, Charlotte can put another $4,000, and so they spend $11,000 per pupil. Robinson County can't spend but the $7,000. We don't have any money to put with it, and so the kids in Mecklenburg are getting $11,000 each, and kids in Robinson County are only getting $7,000. And so the lawsuit happened. You'll learn when you do the case study, and it has had nationwide implications on state funding. It's not just a North Carolina case. Again, it's a watershed case for the United States. And we'll talk about it more, but understanding Leandro was about trying to, in the end, not to equalize the money so that in the end, every child across the state got the same amount, whether they lived in a rich district or a poor district. And when you do your research on Leandro, you'll find out how that came out. Then where we are now with a lot of things that we have to do, like persistently dangerous schools, reporting our incidents, and our low-performing academic schools came out of the 2001 legislation, No Child Left Behind. There's still a lot of mandates, highly qualified, certified, all those things that we have to go by. Again, that was a federal law from 2001, No Child Left Behind during Bush II's first administration. George W. Bush, and so we're still under those guidelines. And then in 2010, we started looking at value added, EVOS, in terms of how much value that teachers are adding to their students. It's written into the standards for teachers now. And then in 2013, charter school expansion, vouchers, elimination of master's pay, and elimination of career status. Those are kind of the things that's kind of a roadmap to where we are. People say, why do we do this and why do we do that? Well, it goes back to all these laws. These are the watershed things that have happened since 1954. We consider to be the modern era of schooling since 1954.
Dr. Lamb, a question. Yeah. Said, did ESSA change No Child Left Behind?
No, it just added to it. The Elementary and Secondary Schools Act just took it a step further. It didn't change it. It's just an extension. It extended some of those same policies. That's exactly right. The Elementary and Secondary School Act just changed, just extended what was that was going to expire under No Child Left Behind. It just kept it going. That's good.
And they'll find that in all of these movements, all of them, that you'll find commonalities in all of them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so when some of the provisions of No Child Left Behind were set to expire, the ESSA, Elementary and Secondary School Act, picked those up and continued them on. So it wasn't anything new. It was just a continuation of what was already happening. That's a good point. That's a good point. And so just like if we roll back through these, we'll see some of these, just like Robinson. Robinson is a watershed case, but it just upheld the acts from 65. It wasn't anything new. It just extended them. They were up for expiration, and the Robinson versus Cahill case extended them on. So those are the kinds of things that happened. And so we had a couple of those along the way, and ESSA is simply more just extends No Child Left Behind. All right, so that kind of gives us an overview of where we are, but the thing to understand here is we are where we are because there are laws and policies in place that we can't change. We may debate their efficacy, how effective they are, or whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. I won't, again, but if you don't remember anything else that we talk about this semester, nobody can give you permission to break the law. As professional staff, you have to follow the law, whether you agree with it or not. And so one of the questions that you're going to get when you're interviewing for your first AP job is there's a policy in your district that you don't agree with, that you think hurts students, would you enforce that policy? Your answer better be yes, because that's what they hired you to do. Remember, you're professional staff. You do not have the protections of elected officials. I don't want to get too far afield here, but the lady in Kentucky, the clerk that was doing marriage license, that refused to do the marriage license for the gay people, she got sued. She's lost everything. Now, the elected officials that supported her, they suffered no repercussions, but she was just professional staff. She didn't follow the law. She lost her court case, and she got a big judgment against her. That's what we're talking about here. As professional staff, you do not have the legal protections of elected officials. Your job is to carry out law and policy, whether you agree with it or whether you think it's good, bad, or indifferent. Nobody can give you permission to break the law. You're professional staff. That's different than being an elected politician. And so when you get asked that question, one of those landmine questions, here's a policy in your district, every kid has to get the same amount of money. Do you think it's the right thing to manipulate that money so that at-risk kids get more? When you say, yeah, that's a great idea, no, we ain't firing you. We actually have one of our case studies this semester is exactly that. The superintendent wants to manipulate state money, which is mostly teacher positions, and get more money to the at-risk kids. And I have students every semester that argue that you should do that. It's the right thing to do, except the problem is it's not the legal thing to do. Remember what your job is. Your job is to carry out law and policy. You're professional staff. Although I agree 1,000%, we ought to do something like that. It's not legal, as you're going to find out when we do the funding case. As you're going to find out, can't do that. Again, you got to know what law and policy is. You got, just like when we had you do the audit and OMA task 1 of all your federal programs, that's so you know what they're supposed to get. It's your responsibility to make sure they're getting those. Those all have federal laws behind them. And you say, why are we auditing these federal programs? Because you need to know what they're supposed to be getting. You need to know what your state has promised these kids that are in the intervention mode prior to EC testing. What does your district say they're going to get? It's your responsibility to make sure they get it. You don't have the protections of elected officials. You don't have protection against personal lawsuits for negligence, whether it's malmiss or nonfeasance. It doesn't matter. You don't have protection against those. So you got to follow the law at all times. So that's just a quick reminder of where we are and how a law course works, what we're here for this semester. I'll go ahead and close that out. I want to hit some financial laws right quick that go along with the budget for this week. Every public school has to develop a budget, and it is public knowledge, as I told you last week. You can't say, well, we don't make that budget. Yeah, you do. You make the budget public because it says it will. And it says right here, including that shall allow parents of children in the school or other interested persons to review and obtain such documents. The law says that you will do a school budget and a school improvement plan, and they will be available to people who come and ask for them. You're supposed to keep a hard copy underneath the front desk of the school. So when somebody walks in, you're supposed to hand it to them. If you're in some of the bigger media markets, I've seen reporters come in and do it just to see if they could catch you not having it. They would do that in Charlotte all the time. Back when they used to have that gotcha on Channel 9, the ABC, I think it was the ABC station, Channel 9, it was always bad about that. They had that one reporter that would slip on the campuses and claim that it was unsafe because he was able to get on campus. And you know, I think his name was Jeff something. But, you know, people will do things like that, but that's extraneous. The reason is people need to know how you're spending the money. You're professional staff. You're responsible to the public for your behavior and what you do. And so you got to have those out there. Remember that when the state gives a district money for a school, it doesn't come in a lump sum. It comes in 10 equal installments. And they subtract the number of absentees. It's called average daily membership. So please remember that every time a kid's out, the state doesn't pay you for that kid that day. So it's important that you get your attendance right and that you work on attendance issues and problems, because it costs you money if you don't. And remember, you don't get all the money up front. So this notion that, oh, these charter schools, kids sign up at a charter school and all the state money went and they come back after the first month and then the charter school keeps the money. No, they got the money for the first month after the first month. Now, if the kid left during the first month, they didn't get anything. The state pays after the month is up. The state doesn't pay at the beginning of the month. They pay the middle of the next month. That's the way that works. And so that it is not true that charter schools get the state money and keep it all year, all the money for the whole year, and the public school gets drained. That's not true. If the kid's there on the roll for 20 days, and then in the middle of the next month when they'll pay for that month. If the kid's left, you don't get the money the next month. Wherever the kid is where the money goes, period. It does not go for the year. That is a fallacy. And it says right here, it's made in monthly installments. That's how state money is dispersed. It tells you right here. Everybody runs the modified accrual accounting system same way. Daily deposits, no matter if it's fundraising money, it does not matter. No money can be held on campus overnight or day to day. Deposits have to be made daily. You have to have your books audited every year. Most districts do that automatically, but your books have to be audited every year. Every school has to have a treasurer. You have state money, local money, federal money that comes in the form of positions, and then you have your local school accounts. Usually you have two of those. Your name and that financial secretary has to be on that check. And when you write checks. Let me go. I got a question on that. Yeah, you're right, Tracy. That's a low blow. So we're making sure that's not true. That was a private conversation on the side, but yeah. So make sure that you understand that money can only be spent as it's intended. It can only be spent as intended. You can't say, well, I've got money in this fund and I'll put them together and buy that. Well, what if that money wasn't earmarked for that? Well, people will know. You're going to get audited every year. You can't spend state money on certain things like consumables. You can't spend state money on consumables. You can't take federal money and pay state teachers. Your local money that counts with your checks, you have the most flexibility and autonomy with those. But again, there's still limits on what you can spend on those. There is a movie on one of the premium channels right now. I don't know if it'll get to Netflix or some streaming. But if you have not seen the movie Bad Education, Hugh Jackman and Allison Janney, you need to watch it. It's a true story about a district on Long Island that they were playing fast and loose and purchasing and everything that you can do wrong, they did wrong in terms of how a school and school district was doing their budgets and their money. And so, they'll get you eventually if that happens. So because you're going to get audited on a regular basis. So you need to understand And just like we had you do on last week, you need to find out the different sources of funds and what they can be spent for. And that's important.
Dr. Lamb, remember, you've mentioned this before, but the checks used to actually be different colors.
That is
If it
correct.
was state or federal or whatever it was, they were printed on different colored paper.
That's correct in terms of, and I was hoping to get to that, but we'll go ahead and touch that now. You need to understand when you get teachers, they're paid from different funds. And what you can have those teachers do is also controlled by the color of their check. So I know that everybody gets automatic deposits now, but Dr. Stedman and I are old enough that checks, when you got paid back in the old days, you actually physically got a check. And the color of the check.
The eagle flew. The eagle
exactly
flew.
Right. The eagle flew on Friday. The color of the check meant who was paying your salary. So you had yellow, blue, and pink checks. And so the blue checks came from the federal government. That meant you were a federally paid teacher. The green check came from the county, came from the state, excuse me, and then the yellow came from the local. We used to have locally paid teachers. Now, that was important. The color of the check, it wasn't the color of the check, but that meant who was paying their salary, federal, state, or local. And so when I became a high school principal in Charlotte, one of the assistant superintendents came out and they bring what I call the book. All the stuff that you've been doing that's illegal, that you guys, that might have been going on for the last 20 years, but the new principal has to stop it today. Excuse me. So when I got there, they were using a blue check, which is a state paid, to run a federal program. And so we had a photography program, a CTE federally funded program that had closed 6 years before I got there. Well, they liked it. So they were using a state paid teacher, an English teacher position. They were using that to pay the federal teacher to teach photography. You don't do that. That's how come I was the new principal. An audit finally figured that out, and the last fellow, he had to go home. That's how I became a senior high principal in Charlotte. They found out that they had been cooking the books and using an English teacher position. And the way they finally found out is the school activity report, the master schedule. Somebody came walking in and did an audit one day and found 40 10th graders sitting in an English class. They said, why all the 10th grade English classes got 40 in them? We had, this was a very large high school where you could hide stuff. I mean, this wasn't, the little 600, the local 600 kid high school. We had 31, 200 kids. You could hide stuff. But when we got an audit, I don't know if somebody called it in or somebody reported them, but all I know is they had an audit and found that there were 40 or more kids in every 10th grade English section. And they don't know why. And they said, well, they were one short on teachers. Well, where's that teacher? Well, he's teaching photography. So that's how I got my first principal job, a high school principal job, senior high. I was already a high school principal, but senior high principal job. But again, those colors of those checks says who's paying their salary, and you have to assign them duties that correspond with who's paying them. So you can't be playing fast, and it's not just the accounts that come. The pay comes separated from different sources as well, and how you utilize those is determined by what we used to call the color of the check, or who's paying, whether they're federal, state, or locally paid teacher, what we used to call the color of the check. And so even though we don't have checks anymore, we still have to understand that you can't assign a federal teacher like a Title I teacher to teach regular ed students. I've told you that story. I visited a school in eastern North Carolina in the middle of nowhere. I had to go back 2 weeks later and meet the new principal. He'd put 20 regular ed kids in a federal program. That you're not allowed to do that. You can't use that federal teacher to teach regular ed kids. They were not on her head count. If you misspend federal money, or if you misspend, like doing like the deal with that I inherited, where they intentionally, see, he falsified the school activity report, was what they got him on. Federal money, if you misspend federal money, they'll fire you today. Like the Title I teacher, he was misspending state money, but what he was having to do in order to do that was falsify the school activity report, which meant he said kids were in one class and they weren't in that class. So that school activity report, that master schedule that goes into Power School, it better be accurate.
And federal money has to be paid back if they find that
exactly right.
You pay it back. Somebody's going to pay it back.
Mm-hmm. I had that new AP at high school in the northern part of Charlotte that was counting kids present, that she was suspended in order to get the suspension numbers down. We had to revert all that money back. That money has to be paid back. Federal money has to be paid back. State money has to be paid back. EC money.
Child nutrition
also has to be paid back. And if you're the one that did that, then you're personally liable for that. That's what we're talking about here, is if you intentionally do these things, you have to pay the money back. The district will hold you accountable to pay that money back if you intentionally did this. So, it does not go well. So you better know the laws and what money can be spent on, not just the money spent on, but what you can use teachers for, because that is spending the money. Because the majority of federal and state money that comes to you comes in the forms of teacher positions. It doesn't come as cash. It comes in the form of positions, and how you use or misuse those positions is part of it. Now, it's the duty of the local school board to do the buildings. I've been asked, why do school districts give charter schools, many of them when they first start out, mobile units? Well, the law is very clear. The local is to provide classrooms. Doesn't say buildings, doesn't say facilities. It says that the local board will provide classrooms. And so many of them have it interpreted over the years. That means when the charter school starts, that they got to give them classrooms, so they give them old disused mobile units. And that's how that process started. It goes back to the law. And so I get asked that all the time. Now, we won't debate whether that's the right thing to do, obviously. I don't know that that's the right thing to do, but that's what they've done, because the law says you only have to provide classrooms. And so that's how we got started. Charter schools got started in the trailer business, for good or for bad, mostly for bad. All right, now, in your district, there's going to be policies on how you handle the money. This is the last district I worked in the last 15 or 20 years of my career in Charlotte, and so I pull theirs. Again, the big thing on the local it's the same things. You don't misspend the money. You got to be audited and all that. The big thing at the local level is fundraising, and so you got to know all the policies. Everything has to be approved beforehand. But here's the part about fundraising that you better hear if you don't hear anything else tonight. It's your responsibility. I don't care if you delegate it to the PTA, the Booster Club, the PTO. It doesn't matter. You're still held accountable for the fiscal accounting of that money. You can delegate the activity, but not the responsibility. That's the biggest mistake that school administrators make on their local budget. I see it year in, year out. People lose their jobs. People lose their jobs because they assume that when they told the PTA that the fundraiser was theirs, that they were done with it. You are not. You still have to follow all laws, policies, guidelines from the local, and you still have to account for every penny of it. And if the money gets gone, it's on you. So you better understand that. And so here are all the local things. You need to look at these in your policy manual for your district. And the one thing that I would say that catches you as well, you need to do when you do, make sure you turn your money in every night. When you do ball games, make sure you do tickets. You're supposed to do a reconciliation on athletic events, and the only way really to do that is on tickets. And so it says that teachers can't tutor for compensation their own students. that says that you can't run businesses out of schools. You have to be careful with, you're not supposed to bring an Avon makeup catalog and put it in the teacher's lounge. That's a business. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to allow those things. You're not supposed to allow your photography teacher to run private business taking pictures for Olin Mills or whatever out of your photography studio. Make sure that you understand all the individual policies for your district. And usually they're in there because somebody did that. I heard a story the other day. They were talking about, wouldn't you love to know the backstory on all the warning labels? Don't drink this or don't do that with something. That's because somebody did that. Well, you're going to have policies on finance specific to your district because somebody did that. I can tell you where this one came from right here. Selling or soliciting we had a group of principals that was running a consultancy company when I first got to Charlotte in the early 90s out of their schools, and they were using teachers. They were taking and developing curriculum materials and selling them. They were using they were making more money than their salary running a business out of the schools and using school staff without compensating them, using copy machines and paper. That was back in the era when we were just starting into accountability, and everybody was wanting to know how we're going to get kids to pass the test, and they were developing all these curriculums that were designed. It was mostly snake oil, but it was designed to, buy this and we'll guarantee you can pass the test. They had a nice little enterprise going. They were making about $500,000 a year back when money was money. And that's how that one got in there. Yeah. So there's a backstory. So don't assume that, you won't know until you read the policy manual. You'll be amazed at some of the policies in some of the districts. Some of them are quite humorous. That you say, well, why in the world would they have that? Well, that means somebody did that. And so they've written a policy in there. So that's why that one is in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg handbook, is the principals took that up. There were 4 of them. Of course, they fired them and tried to get some of the money back, but they absconded with the money and left. But yeah, they were running a business out of their schools using teachers and school supplies. It was quite extensive. So make sure you look at all these cases I've got for you here. This is under last week. I pulled out all the laws, but make sure you spend some time in your local policy manual for your district about the finances for your district and fundraising. Make sure you do that to protect yourself. All right. Okay, we've already talked about that. All right, so this week we were to talk about, I want to point out 2 things in the teacher evaluation manual. And this goes back to last semester, which leads us into this semester. This is from the state manual on teacher evaluation. First thing, teachers must demonstrate leadership in their classrooms and leadership in the school. Isn't that the APTEL? Isn't that the 2 things that we taught you in the APTEL? Why do you think we taught you those 2 things? That's the very first 2 things, the very first standard. Now, that goes with this week's task, which is OMA Task 2. Just copy, as I told you, Task 1, 2, and 3. Take the labels off of the APTEL, and you've got the OMA Task 2. And the reason why goes back to that fits in with this week's lesson on teacher evaluation. These are the first 2. This is the first standard when evaluating teachers. We covered it in depth last semester. We're just simply doing a review in Task 2 of the OMA. Shoots us right into Task 3. All right, so I'm going to make sure that on that. So you have to evaluate teachers. You have to develop it. The state has a system. They have the rubric. All that will be laid out for you in your district. We don't cover that in depth in this class because it's different in every district, their process. But just know that you have to evaluate teachers formally using the instrument that your district has picked. and that your school has adopted on the system that they've adopted. That will be done in your school, but you do have to evaluate teachers formally. But this is from standard 1. It fits with this week's task. All right. I want to kind of follow up or finish up on this week's task on interviewing and hiring new personnel. Make sure that if you're a part of the process, that your district uses a standard set of questions for each candidate. Here's what these are questions that you might face as a potential assistant principal. And it's just, I just use this as an example. I sat on an interview committee last week. We're interviewing for a position at Gardner-Webb. We met as a group. We had a list of potential questions. We picked the 6 that we wanted, and we asked every candidate that we interviewed the same 6 questions. That's just a reminder to protect yourself from a liability claim or an EEOC claim. If you get to be sitting on an interview, and I noticed that we have one student who said that they do get to sit in on the interview. If you get to sit on them, make sure that you know that you're supposed to have a common set of questions, just as a protection for yourself, and you're supposed to ask each candidate the same question. So when we interviewed the candidates last week for a position, we interviewed the top 3 candidates. We asked 6 questions. We asked each person to ask the same candidate the same question. Don't even switch questions. If you got question number 6, as I'd always do, then you got number 6 for everybody. It must be the same process for everybody. And that's just as a reminder, that's an EEOC rule. Sometimes you get bored asking the same question. Well, let's change it up. I want to ask question number 2. No. If you ask Dr. Stedman question number 6, you better ask me question number 6. That's just a reminder as a best practice. So if you get to sit on some interviews this summer, some of you are doing some Zooms and get to sit in on some interviews, make sure you understand you're supposed to ask the same question to every applicant. And don't deviate, read it. Don't ad-lib the question. Make sure that that's one of those things just as a protection for you. All right.
Dr. Lamb, there's one private message that you may want to read and just answer for everybody, because it may apply to everybody.
Okay. Okay, I don't see anything that I've got.
Well, I'll just say it says, so we remove all the subheadings for task 2 from the AppTel and paste as one running document.
Yeah, that's it. Just take them all out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 And Ingrid made a good point here, reading through these. ESA and No Child Left Behind are reauthorizations of Elementary and Secondary Act of 65. That is correct. They're all just reauthorizations. They don't really change anything. They just extend them. They all trace back to the original Elementary and Secondary Act of 65, 66. That is correct. That's a great point. Dr. Massengill, welcome. He's joined us here at the end. We're doing things. I wanted to remind you, and I should have reminded you this week, and I'm sure you already know, evidence artifacts are the way that we do business at Gardner-Webb and in terms of our classes and our evidence of our electronic portfolio. Please remember that that's the way that we do business for sitting principals as well. If you will look at this is the principal evaluation manual. I have it in tonight. They also operate on the basis of written narrative evidences and then artifacts, and the state defines for them what their artifacts are, like a school improvement plan, TWC, student achievement data. Those are all artifacts. Just as a reminder that when you get evaluated, you're going to get evaluated on the evidence artifacts. And so you're going to need to have your school improvement plan. You're going to need to have your budget. You're going to need to know how to develop these documents, and that's what we're doing. It's just one of those housekeeping things that I want to make sure I remind y'all. All right, what have I missed tonight that I should have covered? I've got some good documents in here for you. I didn't cover the EBOS lesson plan tonight. I'm going to kind of save that one to next week. Next week, we're looking at our special programs next week, and I want to include EBOS with that. And I will get to that one. It takes a few minutes to explain it, so I'll do that. So next week we're going to look at FERPA, the intervention process, inclusion versus mainstreaming. We'll look at all of our special programs next week. But I think that will be it. Dr. Massengill, welcome. From a sitting principal's perspective, give us a couple of minutes on school finance, keeping up with the budget and purchasing and those kinds of things, and monies and positions, anything that would be good advice for these folks as emerging leaders.
Well, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Doug Massengill. I'm several of your clinical coaches. I've reached out to you via email, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know. My own 603 class goes from 6:30 to 7:30 on this evening. So I'm going to try to join you guys as I can when my class ends. I've got two things that I would suggest that everybody remember. One is you're in charge of compliance on these issues, and don't assume that somebody's checking behind you, because sometimes when they check behind you, it's too late and you're already out of the job. So you got to know these things, and Dr. Lamb has hit on that really hard this evening. The other piece is be very careful with your fundraising and your general funds, because there are a lot of rules and regulations and laws that pertain to those that principals do not always adhere to, and they don't get in trouble until they're in trouble. So the money has got to follow the kids, and a lot of times principals get away with not doing that until somebody complains. And when somebody complains, that's it. And it could be a teacher that complains. And so what I mean by the money following the kids is if you're raising money for your 6th grade class to go on a field trip and there's money left over, that money should follow those kids to 7th grade. If there's money left over at the end of 7th grade, it should fall into 8th grade. At the end of 8th grade, if there's money left over, it reverts to the general fund. But only at that point does it revert to the general fund, when those students are no longer in that building. And teachers sometimes struggle to understand that. But in finance departments don't always get people to do that when they're doing account cleanup at the end of the year. But I know personally of principals that have been burned due to parent or teacher complaints because the money was not following students.
Yeah, that's a great point. So if you have a citrus sale and you raise money for the band, and their trip to Florida, cost $7,000 and they raise $7,500, that other $500 cannot go to the general fund. It still has to stay with the band. If you raise money for 6th grade field trip, it stays with them. The 7th, 8th. You understand what we're talking about is. But Dr. Massengill made a great point. It's all fun and games till somebody gets their eye put out. It's too late. By the time that we find it out, it's too late. When the audit catches us, it's too late. When the money's gone from the PTA, it's too late. When they, embezzled all the funds, it's too late. You're already hung by then.
And it's tempting when you're looking at those account ledgers and you got the band sitting there with $30,000,
yeah,
and your general fund's about to be in the hole, to say, well, I'll just do an account transfer and transfer this into there, until your band teacher finds out.
Yeah. Until somebody finds out. That's exactly right.
And then all of a sudden you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And so Dr. Stedman, being as old school as he is, would say, your money or your honey. That was the analogy when we came along. You'll lose your job over misusing the money or getting involved in personal relationships at your campus. I don't know that that's changed. I really don't. I mean, money is the one that every day that you've got to be the most vigilant on. I mean, your personal behavior, your conduct, you don't just accidentally enter into some kind of a personal relationship with a subordinate. That's kind of but money, that's something that that everybody has to really work at. And unfortunately, most school people aren't really that good about those kinds of things. But you can't assume that somebody's watching you. That's why we're talking about like intervention teams. You can't assume that somebody from the central office, like the EC department's monitoring whether your kids are getting the MTSS service they're supposed to. That's a school-based committee. That means it's you. School-based budget means that's you. You are the person that's watchdogging that. And if you don't, by the time you find out, it's generally too late. And then you have to do something else for a living. And just hope to get to keep your house. You hope that you don't get sued and lose it as well. Again, we want to do the right things for kids. And that's the reason why we're in the business. But we also have to mitigate the liability that we have, while we're doing our job. And the way we do that is we follow laws and policies. We do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Nobody can give you permission to break the law. And if you do, you have to understand going in that there's going to be consequences for doing that. I think our time's about up. We didn't run much over tonight. I appreciate your attentiveness and your questions. Your work is excellent. The evidence work has been great. You are, again, take advantage of these activities to go out and talk to people, get your name out there, your face, get to be known. Even if you only get to Zoom with them, take your t-shirt off and put a shirt on with a collar, wear a bow tie if you're trying to impress somebody like Dr. Massengill. But, this is your opportunity to shine. This is your opportunity to get people to know who you are. I got to ask a question today, what percentage of our folks get jobs? And I was almost embarrassed to say that we're by far the best in North and South Carolina with our folks getting the job. We're over twice the percentage of anybody close to us. And when I say that, people think I'm boasting, or they think that we've got some trick or something. No, our folks are good and they get out and do the right things. And we encourage you to work on that as you go. And this course really gets you out there. And I really like that. And I want you to be out there. I want you to become known in your district. I want you to do good work, find out how things work, but also get out and get known in the administrative circles. I think that does as well as anything else we can do to help you get a job as you matriculate through our program. I appreciate you all being with us again tonight. Attendance has been great. Your work's been good. We're having a good semester. If you had a better teacher, you'd really be doing great things. I appreciate it. Thank you. Dr. Lamb, I'll let you do the benediction tonight.
Well, I just want to just remind them, Dr. Lamb he's shared so much with you. Please do not wait until the last week or the last couple of weeks and forget about your competency folio. You need to be working on that along the way. And if you work on it along the way, then it won't be a cumbersome task at the very end of this semester because it's a short turnaround time. So please work on things along the way so that, and if those of you that were with Dr. Hamilton last semester, if you need me, I am your coach this semester. So feel free to reach out to me if you need me for anything. Yeah. I see Eric, I see Kareem, there's others. Yeah. But if you need me, reach out to me.
I'm going to cover competency folio again beginning of next week. By then, I will have task stream fixed where you're linked to your coach for the summer. Some of you have got a coaching change, and I will have that done. I get to start that tomorrow. I will have that ready, and we'll hit competency folio very first thing next week. Thank you for reminding me, Dr. Stebbins. Okay. Everybody have a good evening. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
All right.